Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast, and today we are excited to have Martin Salama with us. Martin is the architect of the Warrior's Life Code, which we're going to find out more about that in a little bit. And Martin has a tremendous amount of experience and insight that he is going to share with us today. Martin, welcome, and it's so great to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how in the world did you get to where you are, and the Warrior Life Code, how did that start?
All right. Well, first thing is, Amos, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to be with you here talking about all this stuff. And I've listened to some of your podcasts, so I'm excited to be a guest with you. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Yes.
So for me, I think I'm best off starting back at around 2008. I could go back to when I was a kid, but I think for our audience, let's talk about, so when I was in 2008. And even it's going to go a little earlier than that, but you remember 2008 was an interesting time in the world.
Yes.
Right? So for me, my wife and I were working on a project for 5 years to build a multi-million-dollar health club and tennis center down by the Jersey Shore. And it took us 5 years. For anybody that understands anything about real estate, business, and all that, there's a process that you've got to go through. You've got to find the land. You've got to do the feasibility study. Then after you've done those things and make sure that it's worth doing, you've got to then get the architects involved, the engineers involved, and then the city and the state. And each one of these slow down the process, because each one wants something different. You've got to go out and whatever. So, and every time we'd go back to the city, where they're like, yeah, this looks great, but we need you to figure this out. We need to do that. And you go to the banks and the bank's like, yeah, we love this. We can't wait for it. It's a great item, all that stuff. So finally, in 2008, after 5 years of going through this, we finally got the last approval we needed from the city when they said, okay, you went out, you got yourself a civil engineer who said that the parking looks good and that the traffic impact will be fine and all these things. You're approved. I'm like, fantastic. By now, I'm over $3.5 million into this project. Between my money, my investors' money I borrowed from family and friends, refinanced my house a couple of times along the way for basically to keep it the project going. And back then in 2005, 6, 7, refinancing a house was the easiest thing in the world. They were lending money like crazy. It was almost like going into Costco and getting samples from the ladies on the end of the aisles. That's how they were handing them out. Here's some samples. So it was really great. But I'm excited. I go to the bank. I'm like, okay, we're ready. I'm $3.5 million in. This will be a $15 million project, 100,000 square feet. Let's go. I'm like, yeah, we're not lending right now. What? What are you talking about? You've been waiting for this just as much as I have. Well, things have changed. A month later, Bernie Madoff, the subprime loans, financial world falls apart. And just like that, I'm out. I'm broke. I've lost absolutely everything. All the money I've invested, my investor money, the money I borrowed from family and friends to get to where we were. And, to the point that I stopped paying my mortgage. I stopped paying my car payments. A couple of months later, my son looks and he goes, Dad, look outside. They were towing away my BMW. That's how bad it was. And my house was foreclosed on. But I lived in New Jersey, and there were so many foreclosures that it took them years till they finally came back and said, oh, yeah, we forgot about you guys.
Yep.
And we were able to live in the house during that time. But it also put me into a huge depression, which looking back now, I can easily say was a situational depression based on the situations I was going through. But at the time, it didn't feel like that. I mean, I knew that that's what it was. But when you're in that depressed mode, it's difficult to climb out of it.
Absolutely.
I went through coaching. I went through therapy. And it took me about a year until I finally, picked my head off the pillow, as it were, not literally, but figuratively. And said, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought about my life, and I'd always been a businessman. Now they call us entrepreneurs. Back in those days when I was growing up, we were businessmen.
Yep.
Now they're entrepreneurs. So I was always one of those. And I was like, I don't love doing it. I never loved the businessman part of it. I was a good salesman in my businesses that I was in. I was a good leader, which is to what we talk about here. But I said, you know what, let me look and see what I want to do. And I thought about it, and I thought about what I love doing. And one of the things I love doing is I was always involved in community projects, always in my own little community. And I was always a leader. And I was a leader because I was one of those guys who stepped up and said, yeah, I'll do this and I'll do that, And when people would come in, they go, but I can't do what you're doing, Martin. I'm like, well, we don't need you to do what I'm doing in this organization. We need you to do what you're good at. And I would sit and talk with them and help them figure out what they're good at, what their potential is, and how they can help the organization, whatever that nonprofit was. And I started to realize that I was coaching these people just as I had gotten coached to get through my depressions and everything that I went through. So I looked into coach training. And I found, it was interesting, I found the best school around happened to be their headquarters was 3 miles away from my house.
Wow.
In New Jersey. And they had, they were training all over the world. They would have their trainings all over, but their headquarters was right there. So I looked into it. I had meetings with the people and I said, you know what? I really can't afford this. It's a lot of money. So I went in and I said, can I meet with the CFO? I met with the CFO and I said, look, this is a great program. It's fantastic, but I don't have the money to pay for it. He goes, but you can go finance it. I go, yeah, but my credit is, is nothing these days. It's below 500, even probably in the fours, So I'm not going to get approved. I said, but if we come up with a number today, I promise you every month I'll pay you. So he said, okay. He said, I'll make that deal with you. However, there's a side to it that, we have to be comfortable. You won't get certified, even if you finish the course, until you pay off. That's fair. And I paid him every month, and I actually paid on time and got it all taken care of. By the time I finished, within a few months of my graduating, I paid it off and I got certified. The reason I tell you that is because if you really want something bad enough, you'll figure out how to get it done.
Yep.
And that's part of the leadership part of it. But here's some interesting stuff. About 2 months before coaching training started, it was my 24th wedding anniversary. And my wife gave me a very interesting gift that year. She said, I want a divorce. And now I look back, I'm like, there's 364 other days that she could have said this. And it knocked me down again. Just as I started to, and I said to myself, I remember saying this, why does everything keep happening to me? And now, after going through what I've gone through the divorce and the coaching and everything, I realized that statement, why does everything happen to me, is really a cop-out. It's me looking to blame everybody else and not take any responsibility. So now I say things happen through me. I've heard people say things happen for me. I think that's a little selfish.
Yep. Yep.
So I say things happen through me, good or bad. I was the captain of the ship of whatever happened there, and it's up to me to make sure that I'm going the right way with it.
So I think that's fascinating because, when you think about it, just reframing what is happening in our lives, and so easily, and throughout my life, I've had, good times and bad times, as we all have. I've had a few of those times where I was situationally depressed and it was hard to keep going. But what you just said there is things happen through me, and as leadership experts, that's really what we're doing is we're serving as the catalyst, if you will, to, allow things to happen. And it's so funny because when things are going really great, it's pretty easy to take credit for it and say, hey,
right.
Look how great I am. Look, and then when things aren't going so great and it's, I'm just poking a little fun at it, but we're almost to April 15th. And there are probably some people out there that are thinking, oh yeah, I got to pay my taxes and I got to do this. And why is the government so terrible? And why? And I always remind people, if you got to pay taxes, it's probably because you made money. Right.
Exactly.
with that kind of thinking about that, I identify with that as well. And I think that's a very good point to make, is that things happen through us. I like that.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, very often when we're in those situations or whatever in your life, you tend to rationalize why the things are happening.
Yes.
So I've kind of taken that word and changed it. And I talk about it in my book. I also created a card deck as a way of being like a little bit of a cheat sheet for people. So I say rationalize is really two words. Rational lies. Okay? And let me just say, read real quickly what it says on the card about that.
Sure.
Whenever you think you may be doing something that goes against your values, you'll rationalize all the reasons why it's okay. What you're really doing is lying to yourself that it's rational to think that. They're nothing more than rational lies. Right? And people say to me, I don't get it. What do you mean? So I go, you wake up in the morning, you go, I don't feel like exercising today. Yeah, it's a good thing to exercise, but I'm tired. I didn't sleep well. So is that the truth? Or are you giving yourself a reason to get out of it? Are you giving yourself a rational lie? You say, okay, it's rational. I'm tired. But you know that if you started exercise about 10 minutes into it, I'm so glad I did this.
Absolutely.
So that's at a very basic level. So if you take that now and everything that you do and you rationalize things and people say, it doesn't mean anything. No, but if you put it that way, next time you start doing that, you're saying, well, am I telling myself a rational lie?
Yeah. And you just kind of made a parallel in my mind. It's so funny that sometimes, so let's take an alcoholic, for instance, and they, are sober for some period of time, and they go to the bar and they start drinking, and we ask them what happened, and they start to tell us, well, this happened and this happened. And we say, those are excuses. But yet, if we do it around exercising, or we do it around a task that has to be done for our job, well, that's different. And the reality is that it's the same process, the same thinking. And I like your wording there. It's a rational lie. But you came to this conclusion really through one of the lowest lows of your life.
Yeah.
Do you think that if that lowest low wouldn't have happened, you would have ever come to that idea?
It's a great question. Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not. I find, and very often with my clients, that they have the greatest self-introspection at the lowest points.
Yep.
At the times of life where they're saying, what is going on in my life? Even if they're not saying, why is everything happening to me? Why am I down here? Why am I almost or at rock bottom? And at that moment when my wife said that to me, and I'm still thinking I'm going forward with this coach training, I almost felt like it was God tapping me on the shoulder and saying, so you thought you had it bad? How about we just add a little more to it? Now what are you going to do?
Yes. And I think sometimes, kind of to that point, I think sometimes as those things continue to pile on top, because it always does seem like, when you're in one of those moments, it feels like, things just continue to pile up and pile up. And many times that is ourselves allowing those things to pile up as well. So right. Out of that, you came out with the Warrior's Life Code.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody's like, why does he keep talking about this? Why does I just keep talking? So let me go into it. So here I am. I finished coach training, and I get a text message from a friend of mine saying, now that you're divorced, are you ready to start dating? And it's a woman. And I'm like, Kelly, you're married. She goes, not me, you idiot. I'm your matchmaker. I'm like, what? I come from a very small, close-knit Jewish community in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Everybody knows everybody.
Yep.
Right? So she's like, I'm your matchmaker. I said, what is this, Fiddler on the Roof? I don't understand. What do you mean you're my matchmaker? Well, when there's a single person around, we find someone who's in our organization, who's called The Link, to help you get through it. If you want to date, we help you find someone to date. So I said, I don't know if I'm ready to date. I'm literally just divorced. So we met for about an hour. And she says, you are the most well put together divorced man I've ever met. I said, well, I guess going through coaching as I went through my divorce kind of helped me that. She goes, well, then that's what you should do. So I became a divorce recovery coach.
Okay.
And that's how I started. And I did that for a few years. And it was great. And I loved helping the clients. And as I evolved, I needed to change. And I saw that I realized that some of the things that had held me back was I never liked myself when I was married. And I was afraid of being divorced because I thought nobody would ever love me and now I realized it was because, well, I didn't love myself. Why would anybody love me?
Yep.
And that was probably my biggest fear of getting divorced was, would anybody love me? And now, thank God for going through life coach training and understanding what was holding me back, and realizing that I was a people pleaser my whole life. And people say, I'm not a people pleaser. Nobody wants to admit they're a people pleaser. Now I call myself a recovering people pleaser. But, I learned that as a result of that, I had a lot of other things. I was a short temper. I was a control freak and all those other things that I needed to change in myself. I started changing those things and seeing the benefits in my own personal life. So I started dating again, thanks to my friend Kelly setting me up on dates and all that. And one day, and I mentioned this before we started, I'm ADHD.
Yep.
Right. So my mind's all over the place all the time. And I got into meditating. So could you imagine what an ADHD guy is like meditating? My mind's all over the place. So one of these days I was meditating. I had this download of information that I was loving everything I was doing in my life. And I wanted to now coach people around that. So I finished my 10-minute meditation and I wrote for 2 hours. And out of that, I came up with the acronym for LIFE. And it stands for live incredibly full every day.
Okay.
So that's why. So, and eventually the warrior part came in thanks to 2020,
yes,
when the world fell apart and everybody was worried. And I said, stop worrying and be a warrior.
Yes.
So, but the life to me, it means a lot. It means you want to have a happy life, but it also has another meaning. And that comes from learning from people like Viktor Frankl. The book of Dr. Viktor Frankl, who talks about man's search for meaning.
Yes.
It also means you want to have a meaningful life. A happy life is, I love my life, I'm happy, I'm self-love, self-care, even selfish. Meaningful is selfless. What are you doing for others? If you have both of them, then you're living incredibly full every day.
Yes. I think John Maxwell has a quote, and he uses that quite frequently, is that you want to be a river and not a reservoir. And I think living a full life is that a part of that, a big part of that would be, everything that's poured into you that you pour out. And, you kind of think about that as a leader. How can a leader apply this process or thinking about living an incredibly full life every day? How can they apply that at work? Because maybe, at work, there's rules, there's regulations, there's all of these things that happen. So maybe this isn't for me, is what I'm thinking. How would you apply it at work?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question, because as the leader of your work, and now I went to a coach training school called IPEC, okay? And the gentleman who started the school, founded the school, and wrote some books. One of his biggest books is called Energy Leadership, and it's about leadership. And he says, leadership, everybody's a leader, because at the very minimum, you're a leader of yourself, okay? You get up in the morning, whatever you do, you're leading yourself in that direction, right? And this is the decisions you make. So in business, if you are the head of the business, and even if you're not, you're leading somebody in that business. But as the leader of the business, let's say you are the leader, the CEO, the COO, whatever, the way you set up yourself in the business is the culture that will be in the business. So if you set yourself up as positive opportunities and looking for ways to grow the business and let the people know that you're there with them and that they're not there for you specifically and they're with you, that's how that goes. And the culture will grow based on how you show up, no matter where you are in the business.
Now, can you go too far? I'm thinking, all right, Martin told me I need to live my life, incredibly full every day. So I'm going to stop sleeping. I am going to go to every event that I can. I'm going to pour into everybody every moment of the time. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm going to take care of everybody else. Is that okay?
Yes, you can't take it too far. You can't take it far. You can be a workaholic. You can. So I believe that you have to split your day into 4 quadrants. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean 4 equal quadrants.
Yep.
Okay. One is you time. What are you doing? Waking up in the morning, exercising, praying if that's what you want to do, self-introspection, reading, you time, whatever that is. One is work time, whatever that is. I'm going to work on my business. I'm going to work in my job, whatever that is. The third is family time. Even if you're single, that could be family and friends. It is whatever. And then the last one is sleep time. You go through, you take the 24 hours and you don't break it 6, 6, 6, 6. You figure out, okay, I need 8 hours of sleep. I need 2 hours of me time. And you figure it out that way. And you use that as your blueprint for moving forward. Now, will sometimes one overlay? Yeah. But if you try to stay focused and stay in that zone, now you're living that full life. And, there's no straight balance. I don't believe in work-life balance because you'll never be fully balanced.
Yep.
But I believe that there's enough there that you can work it to make sure that everything gets taken care of.
Now, see, I know for a fact I'm going to struggle with one piece of that, and that's the me time. Because real easily, when I decide to take me time, maybe I decide I'm going to go fishing this afternoon. And I get out there and I'm fishing and I think, oh, well, while I'm fishing, I could take care of these other things. And then I'll convince myself that, well, it's really okay because ultimately it's going to make me sleep better tonight. So my sleep time will be better because I took care of this thing while I was supposed to be having me time. And then me time turns into 3 other things. What would be your advice to me?
Well, my answer would be is you're rationalizing. You're telling yourself rationalize. When you take away from me time, you're either being a people pleaser or you're trying to make sure that it'll happen. Those things will happen. And I believe a big part of that comes to another part of my book. And it's taking the law of attraction to another level. Okay. I learned this from one of my mentors. Her name is Genevieve Davis, who talks about magic. Okay. And magic being that it's within you and it's you having the right mindset as you go out there. So I took it and what I learned from her and created my own version of it. And I call it the cycle of A's.
Okay.
And it's 3-letter A's. And if you could imagine it in a circle, and the first A is ask. Ask yourself, ask the universe what you want. And it could be easily of, I just came up with a great idea. Right? Oh, this might be a great thing to do in the business.
Yep.
Or whatever. So people think, okay, that's the law of attraction. I thought about it. Now it's going to happen. And when it doesn't, people go, oh, the law of attraction doesn't work. Well, of course not, because that's not the whole law of attraction. Right? So that's where the second A comes in, starts to come in, and that's act. So the first is ask. Okay, I asked God, what should I do or whatever. I had this idea came to my mind. Now I'm going to come up with a plan to make it work. Act. Like how many times have you heard, oh, I thought of making that project 10 years or that product 10 years ago.
Yep.
Well, why didn't you make it? Somebody else did, and now they're a billionaire. Because all you did was ask. You didn't act.
Yep.
And then here's where the third one comes in. And I think people, they go, I don't know how to do that, but it's an important part of it. And the last one is attitude. You have to have a mindset that I'm going to make sure that my emotions are not attached to the outcomes. If you could be emotionally detached from the outcomes, when things are happening that aren't going the way that you think they should go, it could be God or the universe telling you you need to make a course correction. But if you have an attitude of it's got to be this way, that'll hold you back.
Makes
and that's
sense.
where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. So back to life. Which one? Which one's more important? Which one's the one that I got to get that one right, or none of the other ones fall into place, or kind of another way I was thinking about it was, let's say, all right, I have an hour of me time scheduled at 6 p.m. and I scheduled it because I'm a high D personality and I got to get it into my schedule.
Right.
And I get home and my wife's had a bad day. Do I say, I can't really listen to you right now because I have on my schedule right here, I have me time. So can you hold that terrible thought of how horrible your day was and I'll be with you in an hour? Or how would that work?
Well, that's why I was very, very specific about there not being specific times and that they can go over each other. And which one is more important? For me, I believe they're all important.
Yep.
Okay. In their right time. And based on the circumstances that are going on. Are there going to be times where one of the three doesn't happen at all? Could be a day that me time doesn't come in. As long as you recognize it and say, I'm not going to allow this to ruin the rest of my day because I couldn't do it today. And I'm also not going to allow it to happen every single day. Now you're being flexible. You're giving yourself the availability. That's the attitude part that I talked about. Allowing it to let go. And say, today it didn't work, but I have to make sure that it's not something that comes every day. Because otherwise, if let's say I take away my me time, eventually I'm going to start regretting and resenting everything around me.
Yep. So kind of, I guess my last question on the Warriors life code, what about, I'm just picturing there's a CEO out there that's kind of thinking like, all right, this is making sense, but now I'm worried. There's not enough time. I'm worried about what's going to happen next week. Is there a transformation or a shift in their state of mind that should happen that will take them from that worrying about every little piece? What is that shift?
Well, I'd love to say I wish we could just take a pill or just make the snap of your finger and you make that shift. But it has to be transformational over time. And that brings in another thing that I talk about in my book, which right at the beginning of the book, is that what you're going to go through is what I call admission, cleansing, and celebration.
Okay.
Okay. Admission is admitting the way I'm doing things right now is not working and I've got to change, whatever that is. So here, that's where this comes in, what you're talking about, saying, I'm worried that things aren't going. Well, worry is different than concern. Worry means I'm throwing it up and saying the sky is falling. Who's going to fix it for me? Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Concern is, okay, something's going on. How am I going to fix it? Right?
Yep.
So that's where the admission comes in. What's not working? Why? And what am I going to do about it? That's the cleansing part. It's the same thing as the act part. What actions are you going to do to change what you're doing? And then the celebration is recognizing the small victories along the way and saying, you know what? Last week I was here. Now I'm just a little past there. I was at 1. Now I'm at 1.5 or 2. Great. Let me celebrate that. Because if I don't celebrate it, I'll easily go back to 1.
Yep.
And then build on it.
So I think you touched on it at the very beginning a little bit, but as I'm thinking about this, one of the questions that comes to mind, and I hear questions like this from my clients and businesses that I talk with. All right, a lot of this seems to make sense. It's great personal development for me, but I'm not here about me. I want to run my business and I want to grow it and I want to see things happen. So why do I need to work on me? Why wouldn't we work on everything that everybody is doing wrong in my organization rather than working on me. How does
Right.
working on me translate to
Right.
helping us grow our business or become better leaders with people?
Yes. So we did touch on it. So you as the leader of yourself, of whatever organization you're in, whatever part of the business is, and if you're the leader of the entire business, you set the culture. So if you are changing yourself, and it's not you going out to your group and saying, "Hey guys, look at me and follow me." It's just doing what you're doing, making the change, and allowing the others to see it without you having to point it out. It's a very difficult little nuanced difference there, because you don't want, I say it all the time, people don't care about what you say you're going to do. They care about what you do.
Yep.
So if you're doing it, they'll notice it. And you as the leader, you control the culture of the organization. So if you're doing it, they're going to say, you know what? He's letting me give my thoughts. He's listening to me. He's not just saying, this is what we're doing, and there's not a question. He's asking me. At the end of the day, if he still makes his own decision, at least he's listening to what I have to say. They'll start to do that with their people underneath them and realize that it has a good effect. And I mentioned this before I think we got on. Bosses are not necessarily leaders.
Yes.
And they have to understand the difference between the two.
Yes. We often, I cover with people, I mean, kind of, slightly different wording, but there's a big difference between a manager and a leader, and a manager manages things and a leader empowers people to manage things. That's
exactly.
So, like anything else, if this is something I'm going to start to work on, then I know I'm not going to be perfect. So using your words, you mentioned in one of your pieces, don't explode like a nuclear reactor.
Right.
So what happens when I'm in the middle of this and we get to a really high stress situation and I do explode like a nuclear reactor? Do I need to acknowledge that and come back and say, guys, team, I shouldn't have acted like that. I was stressed out. I'm sorry, or what have you, because we kind of feel like sometimes as leaders are in a society where you don't ever say you're sorry, just move on.
That's a problem. And that's a problem.
Yes.
It's okay to show your vulnerability, right? We grew up in a culture, for me specifically, the 70s and 80s, where you had to be macho.
Yep.
Right? You had to be tough. You couldn't show your weaknesses. You couldn't show you had to hold your emotions in. And people think if you're vulnerable, you're weak. I believe if you're vulnerable, you're strong, right? But it's how you show it. It's not just dumping all your problems on somebody and crying, what am I going to do? No, this is what's going on. And another thing I talk about, and this came directly out of my own, going through my own divorce and getting through it and recognizing what were my default tendencies that got me to where I was in life, in my divorce, in my marriage. And one of them was, it was the people pleaser, but what it led to was that I had a very short temper and that I needed to change that part of me. And it wasn't to save my marriage or anything or make my kids love me anymore. It was about me understanding that if I wanted to be the best me, I need to hear better. I need to listen better. I need to not freak out as much as I did, and realize that people were coming to me for conversation, knowing that it was going to be more of a confrontation, and shifting that back to being conversations. So I came up with this thing. Now, most of our kids in school, myself, my children, my own children as well, have the firemen come visit.
Yep.
And teach them 3 words in case of a fire. Stop, drop, and roll.
Yes.
Right? If it's fire, there's a fire, what do? Stop what you're doing, drop to the ground underneath the smoke, and roll away. So as I started to develop this thing, this system that I do, I changed it to stop, think, and respond.
Okay.
Because I was a reactor. I had to become a responder. So to me, it starts with stop. Stop If somebody's going to come and tell you something that's going to trigger you, don't allow that trigger to happen and stop before you do something. What happens next? Think. And it could be easy as turning to them and say, that's interesting. I need to think about it a little bit. Just doing that is telling the other person, I'm interested in what you're saying and I need to process it. And then you start saying, is what this person saying affecting me personally? And is that why I've usually freaked out and lost my temper? Is it something that has to be taken care of right now? If it is, okay. But giving yourself, even if it's just a few seconds, now you're giving your chance to collect your thoughts instead of just explode and then respond. So as I put this together, I realized I didn't get to this overnight. So I had to come up with something that was tangible for people to understand. And it goes into exactly what you asked. So I realized that there are times when people are not going to get it right away. And one day, I'm happy to say I got remarried a few years ago.
Wonderful.
Very happy. Thanks to Kelly setting me up with Sarita and us finding each other at the right time. And one day during COVID, my wife took her son outside the backyard and they were playing basketball. And there's a game we used to play when I was a kid called 5-3-1.
Yep.
Right? You take a shot from the free throw line, you get 5 points. Then you run and you catch the ball wherever it goes. You put it up. If you make it, you get 3 points. And then you take a shot from wherever you want, like a layup, and you get 1 point. And if you got all 3 of them, then you get an extra point, a bonus to get 10 points. Because 5, 3, and 1 is 9. And then the extra 1 is 10. So they went out and played. I said, so how'd it go? And she says, I beat him 100-0. So at the time, her son was about 14 years old. I said, I don't understand. How did you score nothing? He said, I kept on going for the 5s. Besides the fact that that's not the way the game is played, what's wrong with scoring the 1s and 3s along the way?
Yep.
Right? So I thought about it, and I said, how about if I take 5-3-1 and turn it around? Now, every time, and I came up with a scorecard. And if you stop, give yourself 1 point. If you think about it and take a moment and wait and not speak straight out of your mouth, give yourself 3 points. And if you respond in a way that's different than the way you've done in the past, give yourself 5 points, and now it's 10. Now, I realize people aren't going to do that right away. They're not going to get to 10 points. So I came up with the scorecard because what happens if you freaked out today? And exactly what you said, you realized you did something wrong. But the next day you think about it. You could take out the scorecard and give yourself 1 point for coming back and saying, stop, I did something wrong.
Yep.
Then give yourself 3 points because you thought, how can I do it differently the next time? What happened? Why did I react this way? What made me feel like this? And how can I change that narrative moving forward? And here's where it's great. Give yourself 5 points if you call up the person that you freaked out on and ask for an apology without expecting anything back.
Yes. I like that. And I mean, in reality, I'm just thinking through in my own world, how many times, somebody comes and asks a question and you give an answer immediately. And this could just be a simple question because as a leader, many times we are put into positions where we are the answer people. That's what people look to a leader for.
Right.
And so somebody asks a question, you give an answer. And I'm thinking back to an experience I had many years ago. I worked in the concrete block industry, and back in the 07, 08, 09 times, after the downturn, there was also a cement shortage here in the United States. And so the plant that I was operating at the time, we were supposed to only get 1 load of white cement per week. And one of the employees came to me. I was in the middle of doing something, and they came to me and said, "Hey, we have a load of white cement. Where does it go?" And I looked at him and kind of probably very smartly said, "It goes in the white cement bin. Like, where do you think it goes?" And I went back and was doing what I was doing. And then it kind of started to process. And I thought, wait a minute, we got a load of white cement the other day. We're only supposed to get one a week. And so I went running over and I said, hey, he said, well, I tried to tell you the paperwork had the sister company's name on it, not our company. And I wouldn't listen. I just said it goes in the white cement bin. Well, anyhow, this created a big problem. And my boss at the time, which was the vice president, he found out about it. We had taken cement away from our sister company, which now they couldn't get any more, and they were in the middle of a big job. Long story short, till he got to me towards the end of the day, his words to me were, I want to hear your side of the story. And I kind of stopped, and I remember thinking to myself, I said, well, what do you mean my side of the story? I said, there is only one portion of the story. I said, employee came to me. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't give him a moment to explain himself. And I very smartly replied to him that it would go in the white cement bin. Where else do you think it would go? I said, and he didn't know what to do, so he went and put it in the white cement bin. I said, it's my fault. I wasn't paying attention. And I'll never forget that he kind of looked at me and he said, I've walked around and talked to everybody, and everybody is giving me some version of the story without implicating you because they respect you and they don't want to implicate you. And he said, you just gave me, the straight story. And the point is, I could have done all kinds of different things, but I had that time in between when it happened till then to kind of think about it. And so I love that.
And take responsibility.
Yes. So you said earlier, and I'm kind of wondering, I'm going backwards a little bit. You said you don't believe in work-life balance. And I know that within the Warriors Life Code, there is some balance there because but there are also, I think you would agree, there are people out there, and we talked about, can you go too far with the Life Code even? But there are people out there that are just all work every day. And, I've heard everything from, well, when you're starting your own business, you got to work 90 hours a week and you just have to expect it and you got to work your way through it. Or, well, we're in a growth spurt right now and we have to do this. My question to you is, from your experiences, do you have to do that? Will the world still be okay if you take a little bit of time for you or your family or another portion of that?
Yeah, I honestly believe the answer to that question is no, you don't have to do it. There is time for everything. And it's about understanding that when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to regret work. You're going to say, I regret not spending more time with my family. You're not going to regret saying, I regret not spending 27 extra hours instead of 20 extra hours.
Yes. And I will mention, I'll share, I have a men's group. We meet every couple of weeks. And one of the gentlemen, and hopefully if he listens, I don't get this wrong, but I would say he's in his 70s. He has outlived 2 wives. And we were talking about something similar. And he shared with me just a few weeks ago. He said, you know what? He said, I want to share something with you. He said, I've outlived 2 wives. He said, and I don't miss any of the things I bought them. I don't miss any of the trips necessarily that I took with them. What I miss is time and conversations with them. So I would agree. And I thought that was very fascinating coming from somebody that was kind of looking back over all of those things.
Right. There's a great commercial out there right now for one of the theme parks. I want to say it's Disney, but I'm not sure. Where the children say, I love this day. It was such a great day. Thank you for taking me. He goes, but the thing I loved most was being with you. Yep.
How true. So as we're coming to an end, first of all, where can people find out more about you and where can they find the book that you have out?
Thank you. So the book is called Warrior to Warrior. Okay. And the best place to find it is to go to, I made it very simple, connectwithmartin.com.
Okay. Connectwithmartin.com. And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of things you can get there for free. You could buy the book, the cards. You could make an appointment just to spend a half an hour with me, see if there's something I can help you with, and we'll see from there.
Awesome. So we end every episode with 3 questions, kind of rapid fire. And
I'm ready.
The first question really comes out of all of the discussions I've had over years. And have you ever heard somebody say something like, well, when I was young, or, well, when I was in school, and I thought, what if we ask all the leadership experts around the world as we interview them, if you could magically bring all of the school administrators across the United States right in front of you, what is one piece of advice that you would give them to maybe instill in their curriculum or within their schools that would help us turn out better, more well-rounded leaders for the future?
I love this question. I love it. And it's something that I do, and I encourage others to do. I try to make somebody laugh every single day, but I don't leave it at that. Once I get them to laugh, I say, thank you for filling my quota for making somebody laugh today. Because it's easy to make people laugh. You do it all the time, right? You're on the supermarket, the person next to you on the line, the cashier, you say something funny, you both laugh.
Yep.
But you both forget about it a tenth of a second later. But now if you say to them, thank you for filling my quota, you've connected with that person. And now they're like, oh, wow. And then you say, pay it forward, do it with somebody else.
Yep. I like it. The second question is, what is your go-to book that over the years you have continually went back to for good insight?
The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Okay.
This book was a game changer when I was starting coach training. They sent me a list of books, and one of them was the 4 Agreements. They said, read 2 or 3 of these books. And when I read the second agreement, which is don't take anything personally, that started my transformation, my journey to recognize that that's what I've been doing my entire life.
Yep.
And the other 3 agreements are powerful as well.
Awesome. And the last question is, in today's ever-changing world of technology, what is your favorite, most useful piece of technology today?
Right now, I'm loving ChatGPT.
Yep.
I'm loving it because I'm able to put into it things. I've taught it my writing style. I put in my entire book. I've put in other things. And when I'm creating something for, let's say, a lead magnet or something, I put it in there. I go, okay, ChatGPT, I want to build a lead magnet for my cycle of ACE. Let me lay it out for me, but it's very important. It's just a tool. Now I take it and I change it and I mold it to what I really want it to be.
Awesome. Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully we can have you back on again in the future. I think we could talk, and I say this all the time, I feel like, but I really feel like we could probably talk another hour or so and unpack a few more things. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Amos. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed every moment of it.
Wonderful. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes. And if you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like us or follow us, depending on your platform. We love the feedback. Give us some feedback and let us know how we're doing. And you can find us on our social media and website at McCoyleadership.com. Till next time, thank you.